Hello and welcome to today's presentation on the future of the fire service and emergency management. My name is Mike Becerra and I'm here today representing the state of Oregon as the newly appointed Director of Emergency Management Agency. I do have some educational background in the field of fire service administration, having completed my bachelor's in the field, as well as an educational background in leadership and executive fire management, where I'm currently finishing my master's in that field. The purpose of today's presentation is to discuss my goals and visions for Oregon's Emergency Management Department for the next 4 to 5 years. Throughout this presentation today, we will be discussing the following topics: emergency management effectiveness during emergency incidents, effectiveness of specialized teams during disasters, the fire department's role in emergency medical service during disasters, the importance of developing partnership in the private sector and with elected officials and local public safety response agencies, working with state and federal agencies during emergencies, plans and methods for coordinating wildland firefighting and mutual aid, current and emerging trends that impact emergency response, and training, professional development, and methods for preparing first responders and other firefighters for future disasters. Before we get into these topics of discussion, I would like to present a motivational statement for the purpose of reinforcing the premise that emergency management is a team effort. As part of a collaborative effort, fire service leaders must use a number of techniques to provide the vision, guidance, direction, and inspiration necessary to keep the members of an organization aligned with the mission of providing emergency management. To start this presentation, I would first like to discuss the importance of emergency management effectiveness during emergency incidents. As we all know, the nation's emergency management system is composed of government emergency management agencies at the local, state, and federal levels, and that local fire and emergency medical technicians serve as the first responders to any emergency that occurs. For an organization to be effective, a fire chief must understand that they will play a variety of roles in the nation's emergency management system by directing the local fire department's response to an emergency, including fire suppression and, when needed, search and rescue and initial medical attention. When responding to emergency incidents, the fire chief of an organization will usually have to serve as a designated incident commander at the scene, as well as serving as the local emergency management director. To be effective in providing emergency management during an incident, a fire chief must understand the nation's emergency management system in general, and specifically the role that the federal government agencies such as the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the Department of Homeland Security, and others play in major disasters in this country. For most fire service organizations, emergency response to incidents occurs at the local level, in that fire and emergency medical personnel respond to these events usually in a systematic and well-planned course of action. To ensure effective emergency management, these local responses should be driven by procedures and protocols developed by the responding agencies. To ensure an effective response and mitigation of an incident, organizations should also develop community-wide emergency plans that incorporate these procedures and protocols. By using these community emergency plans, fire service organizations can ensure that the roles and responsibilities for all responding agencies and personnel for a wide range of disaster scenarios are properly identified and assigned. When an emergency incident or disaster reaches the scope and level that requires a state response, fire chiefs must understand the process for requesting assistance and what resources will be available to them. At the state level, the principal resource available once a request has been made to the governor is the National Guard. The National Guard is an essential resource that can provide personnel, communication systems, and equipment, air and road transport, heavy construction and earth-moving equipment, mass care and feeding equipment, and emergency supplies such as beds, blankets, and medical supplies. The use of the Emergency Management Assistance Compacts can also provide state-level response to a fire service organization in the following ways. EMAC assistance may be more readily available than other resources. EMAC allows for a quick response to disasters using unique human resources and expertise possessed by member states. EMAC offers state-to-state assistance during governor-declared states of emergency. EMAC provides fast and flexible assistance and allows states to ask for whatever assistance they need for any type of emergency. When an emergency incident or disaster reaches the federal response level, most often the size of the disaster event is so large that the abilities of the local responders are overwhelmed and the cost of the damage inflicted exceeds the capacity of the local government. In these scenarios, the chief of an organization has most likely already requested assistance from the state and governor, who will then determine if the size of the disaster event exceeds the state's capacity to respond, and will then make a formal request to the president for a presidential major disaster declaration. This request will be analyzed first by the FEMA regional office and then forwarded to FEMA headquarters in Washington, D.C. At this point, FEMA headquarters staff review and evaluate the governor's request and forward their analysis and recommendation to the president, who then makes a decision to grant the declaration or turn it down. As the new director of emergency management, my first goal is to ensure the effective delivery of emergency management during emergency incidents or disasters. To accomplish this, the fire chief of an organization must understand how to properly navigate the emergency management system and request assistance at the local, state, and federal level. This understanding is essential in providing the proper response to and mitigation of an emergency incident. The next goal that I would like to discuss is the assurance of the effectiveness of specialized teams during disasters. At the local level, special operations challenge most departments, as most organizations do not have the resources to provide the variety of service that may be required. To ensure that an organization has the proper resources available for disasters that require specialized teams, the fire chief must continually assess the potential needs within their given jurisdiction and review whether they have the capability to properly respond when called upon. If a fire service organization determines they cannot provide specialized teams, a regional approach is required. Excuse me. Fire service organizations can utilize specialized teams that include technical search and rescue, hazardous materials, water rescue, and incident management teams. Excuse me. Each of these different teams function to provide different levels of specialization, and although these teams may not be used on a regular basis, the fire chief of an organization must decide which level of coverage will be adequate for their community. For most local agencies, equipping and training specialized teams makes the practice cost prohibitive for the vast majority of departments. In this scenario, departments could adopt a response capability through shared services, to mutual associations, to regionalization. To ensure specialized teams are available for disaster response, fire service organizations could look into the development of regional teams which would cover a specific geographic area and be similar to those fashioned within a mutual aid agreement and are frequently funded or structured at either a county or state level. As we all know, the fire service is called upon to respond to a wide variety of incidents, sometimes to events that are beyond the resources of even the most well-equipped and trained organizations. Fire service organizations must prepare for this scenario in order to meet the needs of those we are sworn to protect and serve. The practice of sharing, combining, and creating response resources with other communities or departments is essential in order to build an effective response capability for special operations. To provide an effective specialized team response during a disaster, fire service organizations must understand that the question isn't if fire departments are going to respond to these specialized incidents, but really how fire departments are going to respond to ensure that this response can be done safely and handled with a high level of operational effectiveness. For all organizations involved in emergency management, over the past few decades, it is clear that emergency medical services have become a critical component of the modern-day fire service mission and will continue to be an important service that we provide in our coming years. As a goal for the next 4 to 5 years, I suggest that all fire service organizations strive to provide an all-hazard EMS skill set, one that often cannot be delivered by other types of EMS providers. I put this forward as a goal to be accomplished due to the unfortunate fact that the fire service has yet to position itself as a critical element of the EMS system on an international and federal level, as well as many state and local levels. As the fire chief of an organization, to accomplish this goal, they must face the challenges of embracing the EMS mission and differentiating fire-based EMS from other delivery models. Over the past few decades, organizations have seen that increased demands for EMS coupled with declining incidents of fire provided a natural fit for greater involvement of the fire service in EMS. This transition has not been smooth and has often been turbulent. However, the increasing need for EMS services has made it an essential service that organizations must provide. To accomplish the goal of providing fire-based EMS, cross-training firefighters is the most common approach, and the advantage of this staffing approach includes an all-hazard ready workforce, the ability to provide rescue and operate in hazardous environments, and deliver medical care whenever needed. In regards to the importance and effectiveness of fire-based EMS, the quality of care that it produces creates better outcomes, lives saved, shorter hospital stays, shorter time in rehab, less pain and suffering, and is gained due to faster response time and continuity of care. To speak on the effectiveness of fire-based EMS, it is clear and evident that the all-hazards capability of fire-based EMS providers provides them the ability to operate in hazardous environments while simultaneously providing patient care, which differentiates them from other EMS service delivery models. And to further emphasize the need and importance of fire-based EMS moving forward, it is clear that EMS is the primary need and importance of fire-based primary response provided by the majority of fire departments in the United States. And if the fire service intends to remain a viable EMS player, they must position themselves as an integral component of the EMS system, emphasizing the differences they bring to the patient and enhancing the care they uniquely deliver in a hazardous environment. As we move on to the next topic of discussion, developing partnerships in the private sector and with elected officials and local public safety and emergency response agencies, it is important to remember that a fire chief or chief officer works in a variety of environments, including operational, administrative, financial, and human resources environments, which collectively make up the political environment of the chief officer. One of my goals as the new Director of Emergency Management is to motivate fire service organizations to foster and develop partnerships. And in order to do this, fire chiefs need to expand their horizons and also understand where they and their organization fit with respect to all government services. To foster and develop relationships with other governments and private entities, chief officers must continually strive to consider the bigger world outside the fire service and recognize the fact that the fire department is only one portion of the many services that enhance the quality of life in a community. When interacting with elected officials and local public safety agencies, one way that chief officers can enhance their understanding in the eyes of elected and appointed officials is to strive to know as much about the community as a whole as they do. In addition, an equal level of research needs to be made into the personalities and roles of the other department heads and the elected appointed officials with whom the chief will rub elbows, which can provide the chief the ability to tailor discussions and presentations appropriately. When building partnerships in the private sector, the chief officer should appear calm, professional, and confident in the political and governance arena, while also being a strong team player, analytical and thorough, open to conflicting ideas, and above all, patient. In an effort to establish relationships in the private sector and with local response agencies, gaining a critical perspective of where the fire department and the chief fits into the huge political picture of overall government services is an important first step in developing respectful and trusting relationships. And in order to foster these relationships, the fire chief should interact with other departments, show an interest in the community's vision, challenges, and economy, and actively participate in processes related to the future growth and development of the community. As we look forward into the future of the emergency management in the state of Oregon, another goal I have is to ensure that local fire service organizations understand how to properly work with state and federal agencies. As I have previously stated, the nation's emergency management system is composed of government emergency management agencies at the local, state, and federal levels, and fire chiefs may be expected to play a variety of roles in the nation's emergency management system by directing the local fire department's response to an emergency. When an incident at the local level exceeds the capabilities of first responders, a fire chief must understand the process to request assistance from the state government and by request of the governor and approval of the president, the federal government. At the local level, if the size of the disaster is so large that the abilities of local responders are overwhelmed, the fire chief must understand and utilize the process turning to the governor and state government for assistance. And if the size of the disaster exceeds the state's capacity to respond, the fire chief must be prepared to interact with FEMA if the president makes a major disaster declaration. Excuse me. In the event that a disaster exceeds the response capabilities of a local agency, is it essential that the chief maintains a close working relationship with state and federal emergency officials? This will provide the chief officer with an understanding of how the state and federal governments get involved in a major disaster and what assistance they can provide. The next topic that I would like to discuss and also frame as a goal for the next few years is to ensure that all fire service organizations in the state of Oregon have established plans and methods for coordinating wildland firefighting and mutual aid support within their jurisdictions. Across the nation, there has been an increased prevalence of wildfires, and the latest study conducted by the National Fire Protection Agency stated that 23% of all fires reported to local fire departments over a 4-year period were wildfires. At the local level, when a wildland fire breaks out in a community, it is the fire chief's job to respond and lead the firefighting effort. This can only be accomplished with proper emergency management planning and with the use of existing mutual aid agreements. Fire service organizations must ensure that these steps have been taken, as planning is the first step in confronting the wildland fire problem. As most organizations have experienced, even relatively small wildland fires use substantially more resources than most structure fires, and due to logistical constraints, very few departments can field that number of resources and have anything left over for other fires or medical emergencies. This dilemma enforces the importance of coordination and implementation of mutual aid due to the fact that a strong mutual aid system fills in the gaps by providing both response resources as well as move up and cover resources to fill empty firehouses. To facilitate the formation of mutual aid, local organizations can utilize the National Fire Service Infrastructure Mutual Aid System, where mutual aid starts at the community level and works its way up to the state level and eventually to other states and the federal level, depending on the size of the incident and the need for specific resources. The use of this system provides a legal framework for providing mutual aid and can provide fire chiefs with specialized resources such as bulldozers, fire crews, water tenders, and helicopters. To accomplish the goal of creating plans and methods for coordinating wildland firefighting and mutual aid, I strongly urge all organizations within the state of Oregon to adopt and implement the use of the IMS system. The next issue of discussion and goal for fire service organizations to accomplish is to identify the current emerging trends that impact emergency response within their jurisdictions. To provide a starting point, organizations can research the following topics: gaining and building trust in communities, taking care of first responders, and building equity by increasing diversity in emergency response teams. The first step in identifying and adapting to current emerging trends that impact emergency response is to enact the process of gaining and building trust in communities. As the head of an organization, the fire chief should use marketing to get information to elected officials and the general public. Marketing can be used to motivate changes in behavior and should encompass how an organization defines and embodies its values to its stakeholders. Through the use of marketing, fire departments can utilize innovative strategies to share their message and solicit community support. The next step an organization should take is to ensure they are taking care of responders by instilling a culture of safety within their department and ensure that firefighter safety and health is the primary value of the organization. To accomplish this goal, organizations must ensure that they have a culture of safety, starting with organizational values and beliefs. The final step in accomplishing the goal of identifying and adapting to current and emergency trends is for organizations to build equity by increasing diversity in emergency response teams. Over the past several years, the Human Relations Committee of the IAFC has worked to increase fire service leaders' awareness of diversity issues and has pushed organizations to recognize the need to address this issue for volunteer and combination fire and emergency service organizations. Accomplishing this goal is essential for fire service organizations to ensure that hiring practices and rules don't create barriers and to ensure that an organization is creating a positive professional environment that is welcoming to all members of the community and beyond. As we are nearing the end of this presentation, the final subject and goal that I would like to accomplish across the fire service in Oregon is the establishment of training, professional development, and methods for preparing first responders and other firefighters for future disasters. To accomplish this goal, all organizations must come to the realization that training is absolutely essential in developing a fire department that is competent and meets the expectations of the community. Training is essential in teaching new skills and improving existing skills, and is only possible with a fundamentally sound training program. To ensure that first responders are being properly prepared for the challenges ahead, the fire chief must keep both hands on the wheel when it comes to ensuring that training is delivered in a quality manner to all members and with constant evaluation and follow-up. Professional development is also an essential step in preparing first responders for future disasters and differs from training in that it involves informative material, cognitive learning, and critical thinking skills usually acquired in settings such as conferences, seminars, and college courses. Organizations must use this process of professional development to combine training, education, and experience in order to provide every member an opportunity to progress, improve, develop, and promote. In closing, I would like to thank you all for attending this presentation today, and I hope that the information we have discussed and the goals that I have set forth can be applied back at your local agencies in an effort to improve the delivery of emergency management throughout the state of Oregon. Thank you.